Okay, Penn State football fans, Bob Flounders here with Johnny McGonigal. It's Monday, Johnny. I put my foot in my mouth last week talking about we're heading to March. It's starting to get warmer. Then Sunday it felt like January, and it's not feeling much warmer today. So I think I'm personally taking blame for the extended cold weather. I'm just going to shut up and just hope we can see 40 and 50-degree weather moving forward. But it's good to see you. It's Monday. Couple things I think we should get to, Johnny. One is the combine is just concluded. Penn State had some people out there. They didn't all test. Jaylen Reed did test. I thought he did very well. I was happy for him. But Kevin Winston was coming off an injury. Abdul Carter coming off an injury. Tyler Warren, he had a physical 16-game season. It's not surprising a lot of these guys couldn't do much other than meet with teams. But just your thoughts on the combine and kind of where it's headed. We were talking about the Senior Bowl as well. As the playoff, Johnny, keeps expanding, and it's not going to stop, the season's going to get longer unless changes are made on the front end. I don't see how, the combine's either going to have to move or they're going to have to tweak their schedule just because the teams that make deep runs, those players are still exhausted, and they want to do their best, and this is not the time of year to do it.
Yeah, Bob, they're going to have to tweak their schedule. They're going to have to move it, or they're just going to have to accept that this is the new reality, that a lot of these players who have deep playoff runs in a long college football season are not going to be working out at the combine and instead falling back on their pro days, which are about a month later. And scouts, coaches, and executives are just going to have to hop on the private jet a little bit more to get to State College in that short runway, to get to Tuscaloosa, to get to Georgia and South Bend and everywhere for these pro days. Because, if I'm Abdul Carter, first of all, a bit of news coming out there at the combine that it was the shoulder injury that he suffered against Boise State in the CFP quarterfinal, and played with one arm against Notre Dame. And that was the report coming into the combine, was that he wasn't going to work out in Indy because he was still recovering from that, but that he was expected to, work out at Pro Day in late March and at Penn State. Then out in Indianapolis, Adam Schefter was some reporting from, his agent, Drew Rosenhaus, that basically doctors discovered a stress reaction is how they framed it, how they called it, in one of his, I think it was his right foot. There was some consternation, some thought that he might have to have surgery. He'd be out for 8 weeks and miss pro day, but he is going to push through that injury, that stress reaction in his foot, and still work out at Penn State's pro day. I believe that's on March 28th. So something to keep an eye on. But Abdul not working out in Indy, not a surprise. Tyler Warren, the amount of punishment that he doled out in the CFP, that does wear and tear on your body a bit. And so not surprised that he didn't work out. KJ Winston, like you mentioned, coming off that injury that ended his season that he suffered in September. So, I just think it's the reality of the situation with the combine. There were always guys who were opting out, essentially, and just going there for team interviews and stuff. But now, especially with an elongated, playoff, you're just going to see more and more of that. And I don't know if they can really move the schedule, because, you've got the draft is a certain time for a reason, because you got rookie mini camp, you got regular mini camp, you got OTAs. Then you're talking about changing the entire NFL schedule, the preseason schedule. And it's just really hairy. I think this is just kind of what it is now.
You're right. I think that what they could do is just, they're going to have to just, pro days are going to become more and more significant. And that's not a bad thing. But I think also maybe at the combine, the teams can still meet with the star players that had long seasons, and maybe you could invite some more players that were just kind of on the fence. There's always some players that sneak through that don't get invited to the combine that end up having meaningful NFL careers. You could invite some more of those, because it's a fun time. I know Indianapolis does not want the scouting combine to go away, or whatever future city is going to host it. But before we move on, Jaylen Reed did work out at the combine, and he gave it his best shot. Like, he really did. He's had a chip on his shoulder, Johnny, and I love that he has, since before the start of the 2024 season, the way that he carried himself, he was kind of, Kevin Winston was kind of the guy that everyone was like, hey, watch out for this guy. And Jay Reed was like, well, I'm pretty good too, and I'm going to show you I'm pretty good. I'm going to tell you I'm pretty good. And then after I have a pretty good game, I'm going to let you know that I had a good game. But to his credit, what I like about Jaylen Reed is he played so hard. He always did. But he backs it up, right? The chip on the shoulder is real, but more often than not, he was involved in a lot of big plays. I thought to run, high 4.4s or 4.5, whatever you want to call it, is impressive. I think he did a front flip after he did it. I think the guys were kind of rooting for him, but I just think that he is going to find his way onto an NFL roster, and he's going to stay on an NFL roster, and he's going to get better and better. I'm not sure where he's going in the NFL draft. I don't know if you have thoughts about that, but to me, I think it's a coveted position. Safety is an important position. I don't know if he's a top 100 player. I think he could be a top 100 player, but I think once the third round or day two, fourth round, whatever it is, somebody's going to be smart enough to take a shot on him, and he is going to be somebody I think that's going to improve that team.
Yeah, so Jaylen out of the combine did great, right? So he ran a 4.49, and he let everyone know it too. In classic Jaylen Reed fashion, he tweeted all caps saying, "I thought I was slow. We take that." And Max wrote about that, and Max and Joe Hermit, they were out there all week for the combine. Yeah. So listeners, readers, if you guys haven't taken a look at what Max and Joe did out there, it was great stuff, and go check it out. But so Max talked to Jaylen about being, feeling disrespected, feeling, overlooked, and that's not new though. Like you mentioned, he was feeling that even in the preseason before this past season about, hey, thinking that, kind of in like a, not a direct shot way, but like thinking that KJ Winston got way more publicity than he did going into the year, that he thought he deserved. He thought he deserved some more pub, and ultimately, he did. I look at him as a player. I think he said to Max that he thought he was probably a day 2 grade, which would mean second or third round. Even if he's a fourth rounder or even a fifth rounder, wouldn't be surprised. But I look at him in terms of his career, in terms of like not the physical, like not the same physical build necessarily, but the same kind of player and what he brings to a defense as Jair Brown, and kind of what Jair brought to Penn State's defense, that leadership. He's always in the right spot. He's going to make a play both in the pass and the run game. And we saw Jair fall to what? I think the Niners traded up for him in the third round.
Yep.
And he's made an impact there out in San Francisco. So I could see something similar happening with Jaylen Reed, where, a team trades into the back half of the third round or is happy to take him in the fourth or fifth. And he earns not only a spot on the roster, but a role within the defense and on special teams as well, because we know that, he can contribute there. So, very much looking forward to seeing how all these guys' careers play out. Obviously, Abdul could go number one. I think, him or Travis Hunter or quarterback is likely there. Tyler Warren could go anywhere from 9 to 15 to 16, 17 as the number one tight end off the board. But I'm interested to see how Jaylen ends up, where KJ Winston goes, where Kobe King ends up going. But Jaylen Reed, for a guy who, probably didn't get enough, pub, enough recognition in the preseason and earned it, throughout his last year at Penn State, really happy for him.
Yeah, excuse me. And you mentioned Kobe King. He's another one that really fascinates me. He didn't. He did some drills. I don't think he did any of the traditional, combine testing. I think bench press and 40-yard and vertical. I believe he didn't, unless he did it late. I was looking on NFL.com.
He didn't run. Jaylen was the only one who ran of the 5 Penn Staters.
Yeah, and he's a guy. I mean, Kobe was another guy that had to have been beat up by the end of 16 games, given the position that he played. James would say we can't take him off the field. He was that valuable to our defense. He's probably right now viewed as a 2-down linebacker. He's going to have to show that he can be a 3-down linebacker, but they're rare. It's not, those are rare athletes out there that don't come off the field. It's not unusual for many of the guys that what Kobe's good at to still be drafted just a little bit later. Smart kid, productive kid, Kalen King's twin. But I'll be interested to see how teams kind of view him and maybe where he fits. He's another guy that probably you're looking at. He's just because of what we talked about, and the position's a little bit devalued. Not a top 100 player. He's a guy that's going to probably factor in the mid to late rounds. But the way that Penn State's coaching staff talked about him, the way that the players talked about him, he was a second team All Big Ten pick, never came off the field. I think that he's definitely going to get drafted. But I just hope that he needs to go to a team. It's got to be the right fit, because if he goes to the wrong team, it might be really hard for him to get on the field right away. But he's another guy that could help, and he should only get better as well.
Yeah, definitely. And what you mentioned, though, being kind of a 2-down guy and got to prove it to be a 3-down guy, I think that's totally fair. And it's going to be all about fit. And when it comes to linebackers, with how you mentioned it's devalued, the position itself is devalued in the NFL. You got to find that right team that needs a run stopper, that needs a guy who can, you just plug in and, if he's a 5th, 6th rounder or whatever, a team that needs a run stopping linebacker on a rookie contract that, can help you out in terms of cap space and not going out and spending big on a linebacker. So, intrigued, super intrigued to see where Kobe lands. He was one where I wouldn't have been surprised either way if he left or came back.
Right.
And I'm sure Penn State would love to have him back, and that defense would love to have him in the heart of it again in 2025. But, maybe he's doing that for an NFL team this time next year. But certainly intrigued to see where Kobe ends up. And KJ is one, too, where, we didn't hear from him at all really after that season-ending injury. I guess it was a partial ACL tear that he suffered in practice. Leading up to an early season game in September. And, he before the year, he was a possible All-American, projected first-round pick, and obviously didn't get the chance to show that after having a really nice 2023 season. And so, do teams look at the film from 2023 and are sold on that? Or are they sold by the team interviews that he does? Where he lands, he could land anywhere from, for me, like the 2nd round to the 5th, and I wouldn't be surprised. I think he is a super talented guy and should go 2nd round, 3rd round, if a team is smart and they are good on the medical end of it. But yeah, beyond Abdul and Tyler Warren, kind of locked into that, top 15 picks.
Yeah.
Really some really interesting stuff to keep an eye on as we look forward to Pro Day later this month and then the draft next month.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, NFL teams are going to have to do their homework on Winston, just because they're evaluating him based upon one season, right? Because he did play as a true freshman, but he was a kind of a role player. And then, he was Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week after he and Jay Reed wrecked West Virginia's offense. But then, I think it was the Bowling Green game, he had to come out, and it was obviously a significant issue. But very interesting decision for him to kind of come out with not a lot of tape to show. He's obviously an athlete. Anyone could see that. Rare size, rare speed, rare instincts. So the team that does the homework, the best job with homework on him, is probably going to be the team that I think he'll probably go earlier than a lot of people think, because people will say, well, he only had one season. But I do think that there's a lot to like about that one season that he had.
Yeah.
So I do think you'll see him maybe go a little bit earlier, I think, than maybe whatever the projection is. If it's round 2, early round 3, he's that good. And I think Penn State's coaching staff would probably back up the fact that he was one of their best players before he got hurt. So we'll see, Johnny, but let's talk about some safeties that are coming back as we get back to your series here on the Blue White Breakdown of Penn State's most important players in 2025 as they get ready for spring practice, which is going to be late. I think it's March 25th is the first scheduled spring practice. So we're still a little bit away from that, Johnny. But last week we talked about, I think, numbers 25 through 21 and some players that were interesting to us on that list. Just to recap, Ethan Grunkmeyer, the third running back, whoever that is, transfer Eni White, King Mack, and Dom DeLuca were your first, 25 through 21. So what I think is so interesting about this list, Johnny, is the players that you have, as high as 20 through 16 are some really good players potentially. But this is a pretty talented Penn State team, and it's hard for them to get much higher than where you put them. So we'll just each pick one off of this list, 20 through 16, if my math is correct. So 20 is DeJuan Lane, second-year safety. Another second-year player, Anthony Specca, linebacker, 19. Tyseer Denmark, yet another second-year player, wideout at 18, big position for Penn State this offseason. Cornerback Elliot Washington is 17, and another transfer who really paid off. Penn State invested in him, and he really rewarded them after Anthony Donko got hurt. Nolan Rucci is number 16, a swing tackle to start the year, but Penn State's starting right tackle and a very good one to conclude the season. So when you look at that list, it's a really interesting list because of the different places these guys are in their careers. Who's maybe the one player that you want to focus on and maybe talk a little bit more about?
Yeah. Really quick, just one closing thought on KJ. I think I said I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up second to fifth round. I would be surprised if he ended up in the fifth round. I would be surprised if he ended up that late. I would pencil him in as second or third round.
Yeah, the upside's too great for that guy. Somebody won't let if he goes to something happened if he goes in the fifth round with the rehab, because he's just a freakish athlete, and that's a very critical position.
Absolutely. And so, Penn State loses him. They lose Jaylen Reed, which makes Dejan Lane super important. Makes Zaki Wheatley, who is, higher up on the list of 25, super important. But the guy I want to focus on of that group is Tyseer Denmark.
Yeah.
A player who, coming out of Philly, all the athleticism in the world in terms of a jumper, in terms of a contested catch guy, explosive off the line of scrimmage. And he got some run there, as a true freshman, but coming in when he did, he was a later enrollee, didn't come in January. And so, more difficult to build a rapport with Drew Aller, especially as a true freshman. You've got Harrison Wallace and Amari Evans in the room, and Liam Clifford was a coach's favorite in terms of knowing the playbook and knowing where it needs to be and all that kind of good stuff. Julian Fleming. So he didn't make an immediate impact as a freshman, but now Fleming gone, right? Wallace gone, Amari Evans gone. You add Kyron Hudson and Devontae Ross into the mix from USC and Troy, respectively. Wouldn't be surprised if Penn State adds another wide receiver or two in the spring transfer window when that opens in April. But
yeah,
Tyseer Denmark has a huge opportunity here. The reason why he's on this list is it's the most important players, of the 2025 offseason. And for him to have a full offseason, a full winter workout, a full spring camp with Drew Aller, and you put together the tools that he has with the opportunity that lies ahead of him, I think he could be a serious game changer and playmaker for this offense that at the wide receiver position could certainly use it. So I look at him as a really important player, for this program, and obviously looking ahead to 2026 as well, and maybe even 2027. But if you want to look and find, a young player in that wide receiver room that could, really develop into a future star at the position, it's Tyseer Denmark for me.
Yeah, that's a good one. And also, apologies. I think it's Dejan Lane. I think I called him DeJuan. It's Dejan Lane. Sorry, Dejan. Important player. They're missing their two safeties that were leaders on the team. And he made, you could tell he made some plays that are big time plays. But he was still learning that position cannot be easy, especially new defensive coordinator comes in. So I'm sure it was an adjustment for him. Big future. I agree with him. The one guy that sticks out to me is Elliot Washington, only because every time he got on the field, right? I think he dealt with some injury issues, but one of the team's fastest players, one of their highly regarded players. And I think when this guy is healthy and he puts it all together, other than AJ Harris, he could be their second best corner this year. And they have that's a pretty good top four that they have, right? In Tracy and Audavian Collins, and they have some other players that they really like. They have some second-year players that they really like. But I think Washington is a guy that closes on the ball very quickly, very good in, I think, man-to-man coverage. Even though he wasn't starting for the longest time, he had the most passes defensed, I think, on the roster. And I just think he's a versatile. He's got good size, and I think that you could see when he got in the game that he wasn't scared. Right? He was confident. Even going back to the Peach Bowl, I think he got some run when Jaylen King opted out. But he's a guy that I think as he gets more comfortable, he's pretty fearless out there. I think that he could have a huge 2025. And that's a good corner room, even though they lost some players. So he's a guy that I'm really anxious to hear what James and maybe, the position coaches kind of Terry Smith says about him, because I think he could be really, really valuable to Penn State. And they're going to play 4 or 5 corners regardless, but I think he's a true playmaker, and I do think he's a guy that if he's healthy, Johnny, he could be a guy that gets some kind of all Big Ten recognition. I think he's that good. I think it's all in front of him. So I'm excited to see Elliot, in 2025. So good list so far. We're still not done with it, but it's remarkable that players of this caliber are just we're not even into the top 15 yet. And that's, I think, why I think you and I are pretty excited to see where this Penn State team could go this year. They do still have a couple needs, but they also have a lot of returning talent.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Elliot Washington is number 17 on this list, I think, is indicative of how much talent this team has, because I really like Elliot Washington as a player. You mentioned the speed, but also the production started to come for him this year, rotating in on the outside. And, A.J. Harris had that one spot on the outside nailed down, and Jalen Kimber came in as, a senior, a veteran, a guy who had experience at both Georgia and Florida. And those two were the main guys on the outside at corner for Penn State this past season. But now that Jalen Kimber's gone, I mean, that spot is Elliot Washington's to lose. If you want to look at it in a more positive way, it's like that's his opportunity to thrive. Like this is a real opportunity for Elliot Washington. And I thought he played well down the stretch, especially. And a guy who you mentioned that Peach Bowl. It was him and Zion Tracy who were kind of thrown into the fire. And Cam Miller too, who is now at Rutgers. But when Johnny Dixon and Jaylen King, when they opted out of that game, having to go up against Ole Miss's passing attack with a great quarterback in Jackson Dart and some really physical, good receivers, Trey Harris being the biggest one there. Like that was a really tough challenge for them. And I think both those guys, Elliot Washington, I mean, it was a challenge. We'll say that it was a challenge. But Elliot Washington and Zion Tracy, I thought both grew immensely over that offseason and then had really good 2024 seasons. And now you have a new coordinator coming in, and Jim Knowles, who likes to get, a little weird sometimes, not weird, but like fun with his DBs and everything. And so I'm very, very intrigued to see what Elliot Washington can do, moving from a rotational guy to a nailed on starter in this defense.
Johnny, I think if you told Jim Knowles that you like the fact that he gets a little weird on defense, he would take that as a compliment. He seems like a guy that, he would be like, yeah, that's kind of right, because I do some things that not a lot of teams are going to be ready for, a little bit unorthodox, and he can get weird in a good way. And I think that's another thing we're looking forward to seeing at some point in the fall. But yeah, Elliot Washington is an interesting player, a talented player. This is going to be a defense that there's a lot of moving parts, with a new coordinator. Yeah, some obviously some significant losses, but a lot of returning talent at the right spots. We just talked about Deny. Penn State's fortunate to have him back for a 4th year, especially now that Smith Vilbert is out of here. Zane Durant coming back is huge, I think, for Penn State as well up front. But they're going to need to develop some depth. Some guys are going to have to step up. They're going to have to hit on a lot of some of the transfer players that they added, but they've always done that, right? I think that's why they're selective, but they believe that the guys they do add are guys that could definitely contribute at some point in their first season. So I think you have to trust Penn State, James Franklin, and his coaching staff when they get selective with the portal, something that Pat Kraft talked about. Don't live in the portal, but they hit on so many of these players. So very interesting offseason, Johnny. It's just getting started. We're in March. It's still cold. Not happy about that, but always good talking with you next week. We'll have some more updates. Winter workouts are ongoing. I think there's still a couple of more there. Some Penn State veteran players are killing it in winter workouts. That's usually a sign of what the coaching staff thinks about them. But yeah, Johnny, good chatting with you. Stay warm. I believe you're going to be doing some recruiting stuff. I'm not sure if that we were talking. I think you were talking, before we started the podcast. You're going to get, Penn State fans want to know as much as they can about what's going on in recruiting. I believe you have plans to do some of that with some players that are either targets or verbals in your area, and you've done it before, and I'm pretty sure you're excited about that as well.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of players, and obviously you're based in Harrisburg. Max is based in State College. I'm in Philly. There's a lot of prospects who are either already in the 2026 and 2027 recruiting classes or guys who Penn State would love to have. And that time is coming up. I mean, we got, visits ongoing, right, during or around this time. And then we have, camps and visits in the upcoming summer. And it's kind of when a lot of these guys, the upcoming seniors will start pulling the trigger on where they want to go. So, I'm in talks to get out to some high schools, talk to some of these top end prospects in the Philly area, South Jersey, Philly suburbs, and very much looking forward to that. So stay tuned over the coming weeks for some videos, some feature stories on those guys, and I know that we'll have plenty as well. Throughout winter workouts. Max, I'm sure the notebook isn't empty yet. I don't think from the combine, and we got pro day coming up. So a lot going on in the Penn State world, Penn State football world, and plenty to talk about.
Good chatting with you, Johnny, here on the Blue White Breakdown. We should be back early next week. We're going to have some more podcasts throughout this week. We're going to stay busy this off season. It's really starting to get interesting with Penn State in spring practice and pro day all coming up later this month. I'm still excited. I'm glad you used the word weird with Jim Knowles. I don't know why, but I think that's a great way to describe. I swear if you told him that to his face, he'd be like, thank you for saying that, because he's
like, yeah, I'm good with that.
Somebody finally recognizes what I'm trying to do, and I am a little weird. I bet you would love that.
I think you would. One thing to add, too, a little housekeeping item. So as we talked about with the podcast and everything, Thursday, me and Max will be recording. I think it's going to be the morning or maybe lunchtime. We're going to be going live, and we're going to make that a regular thing moving forward. So listeners, if you've got a lunch break on Thursday and you want to hop in and ask some questions in the chat, and me and Max can answer them, by all means, we're going to be starting to do that as a regular thing on Thursdays during the lunchtime hours. So should be a lot of fun. Looking forward to that starting this week.
Yeah, John, don't underestimate. I might jump on and ask you a question or two. I think I might have a little state wrestling duty on Thursday in Hershey, but if I'm done early enough, I might pop in. If you guys are going live, don't be surprised if you see somebody in a Buc-ee's visor, or somebody in a Buc-ee's visor asking you a question. That's probably going to be me.
I was going to say, you should just make your username like Buc-ee's Visor Man 123. And I think we'll get the picture. I think we'll know who that is.
All right, guys, take care. We'll be back soon.